So plants can reproduce sexually and asexually, or actually both. There are pros and cons to both methods, and each species has evolved a method that works best for them. Sexual reproduction is more complex, but it increases variation and may help the plant to adapt to changing environments. Asexual reproduction is very simple, but it only really works well in a good, stable environment, as there's no variation in the offspring. So we'll look at asexual reproduction in plants first. Plants have adopted many different ways of carrying out asexual reproduction, but most involve some part of the parent plant growing and then breaking away to form the new plant. A great example of this, an example you know about, is strawberries. With a strawberry plant, if you look carefully, there'll be a special type of shoot that comes out at a different at an angle off the side, called a runner, and it will go a foot and a half from the parent plant, and then it will drop down and it will hit the soil, and it will start to form its own roots and its own leaves. And then the runner will detach, and essentially what that plant has just done is cloned itself, and that's a type of asexual reproduction. All the new cells that are produced in asexual reproduction are produced by mitosis, therefore they are all identical, there is no genetic variation. Gardeners have taken advantage of this for ages. What they can do is they take things called cuttings, where they actually chop off a bit of a parent plant and stick it in the soil, and that will grow into a copy of the parent plant. So you've got a really expensive rose, you can take lots of cutting from it and make lots of copies of that same rose, and that's just doing asexual reproduction, but doing it artificially yourself. Sexual reproduction, much more interesting, more complex, but much more interesting for plants. For sexual reproduction, you need to have gametes, you need to have sex cells, and in the plant, the gametes are pollen grains for male and ova for the female part of the plant. Now, plants are funny because you don't have male plants and female plants, not like humans. Flowering plants, they have both the male bits and the female bits. So the plant will produce both pollen and ova, but obviously it doesn't really want to just mate with itself, because that's not going to be very helpful. So you still want the male bits from one flower to go to the female bits of another one. Okay, so you still want plants to breed, but the plants will produce both male and female gametes. And remember, gametes are haploid cells. They've got half the number of chromosomes, so when they fuse together to form the zygote, that will go back to the full number of chromosomes. Now, in order to get the male gamete from the male part of a flower to the female part of another flower, you need something to transfer the pollen. Something's got to take the pollen from one place to the other. Okay, there's no sexual intercourse in plants. Plants don't have big penises that come out and wave around and stick into other flowers. That would be a bit strange. They actually use bees or insects, or sometimes birds, to carry the pollen from one place, one flower to another. Or they use the wind. They produce loads and loads of pollen, throw it up into the air, and hope that the wind wafts it and makes the pollen land on a female part of another flower. Now, that process of pollen moving from one flower to another is called pollination. Following pollination, you want fertilization to happen. You want the pollen to fuse with an egg, and you want the zygote to form, and eventually that will form a seed, which is basically like a little baby plant, and that will get enclosed in a fruit, and that will then help with the seed to be dispersed and hopefully then germinate and then grow into the adult plant. So what we're going to do is we're going to work through these different processes, and we'll keep coming back to this summary to remind ourselves of how far we are on the journey of how a plant reproduces. We've got gamete formation, making the pollen, making the eggs, pollination, which is how the male gamete gets the female one, then fertilization when they fuse together, then you make the seed and the fruit, then you disperse that seed, and hopefully then you get the germination and the offspring being fully produced.